Good afternoon. Welcome to MCIE's Spring Webinar Series on Transition Planning. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Barb Gruber from MCIE, and I will be your facilitator for this webinar. Today's session is on post-secondary education with Dr. Meg Grigal. This is the final session in the series. If you didn't get a chance to attend the previous two sessions with Michael Callahan and Ellen Condon, they'll be available soon on our website at www.mcie.org. During the session today, you will be muted and you can type questions in the chat window, and Meg will answer these questions at the end of the session. The session is being recorded and the link will be sent out in a follow-up email within the week. Meg is a senior research fellow at the University of Massachusetts, Boston at the Institute for Community Inclusion, where she co-directs Think College and is co-principal investigator for TIPSID, National Coordinating Center, and Consortium for Post-Secondary Education for People with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. During the past 15 years, Meg has worked with families, students, transition personnel, and higher education professionals throughout the country to advance the quantity and quality of inclusive higher ed options for youth and adults with intellectual disabilities. She has published numerous articles, journal articles, research briefs, book chapters, and monographs, and has co-authored 2 books on this issue. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Meg, and she really will give us a good time this afternoon. So, Meg?
Thanks, Barb. And hi, everybody out in webinar land. Barb's going to be changing things to my session. And I have participated on the giving and the receiving end of many a webinar. So I know all of you are trying to decide how many screens to keep open right now. Yeah, you can be giggling. And I'm very happy that there's a small sidebar next to my window that shows me now I can get $20 off Ultimate Hair Removal Solutions. So if you get bored, I guess you can do some shopping. Southwest is also showing that they fly all over America. All right, I'm sorry. I'm starting off silly, and I will put my doctor hat on and be a grown-up. I'm thrilled to get a chance to be a part of the MCIE transition series, and I'm sorry I missed the first 2 sessions because those presenters are wonderful, wonderful practitioners, and I'm sure gave you extremely valuable resources when it comes to customized employment and the discovery process. And I hope I can give you some additional good resources related to post-secondary education. As Barb mentioned, my background specifically is focused on transitioning youth who have intellectual or developmental disabilities, but I think the strategies I'm going to describe and the issues I'm going to relate to you will apply to all students with disabilities. So just to get a feel for who's on the line, I see lots of names. If you could just type in the chat box if you're a professional, a parent, do you work with college-aged youth or transitioning youth? I'm just trying to get a feel for the group, and usually I'd just be asking you to raise your hands if we were all sitting in a nice room together, you know, wearing our best conference khakis, but just type it in there so I can get a feel for if we're looking at parents. I aimed most of the content in my session for either parents or transition professionals in the K-12 system. So hopefully this will relate to many of you. If you're not familiar with Think College, I'll be sharing a couple resources that we've created. ThinkCollege.net is our clearinghouse for all information that I have. If I mention a resource, I can guarantee you it's on ThinkCollege.net. And myself and my colleagues in the Think College team have been working in this area for quite a long time, trying to change expectations and increase opportunities for people to go to college. So with that, I'm going to move us forward. Let's see if my little doohickey works. All right, and I see parents, professionals, transition, teacher, so wonderful. So it sounds like we have a mix of people. All right, so I want to just start by sort of acclimating why college? Why are we talking about college? And we all know that, you know, the typical reason to go to college, you want to grow intellectually, you want to get a better job, you want to prepare for your career, you want to make more money. But there are a lot of informal things that we learn in college, whether it's how to manage your money, how to balance your social life with your academic or your employment obligations, how to take care of yourself, and it really does help most of us have the opportunity to grow up and mature over time. And I think when we talk about college, we all have, you immediately think, all right, here's that 2-year or 4-year student who's got a good GPA and they're going to go straight from high school into college, probably full-time, they're going to get a degree. And here's a little description. I'm going to say it because this is being recorded, and I don't know if anybody's requires any modification. So the student is academically prepared, is a strong self-advocate, has a clear understanding of his or her accommodation needs, is financially secure, and has clear career goals. Now, I can almost lay money on the fact that there is very few ideal college candidates, and even more so, ideal college candidates who have a disability. So the ideal college student is a lovely idea, but in general, what we typically see in college students, and these aren't just students with disabilities, these are all college students, is that for the most part, many of them are not academically prepared. The average time it takes for a student without a disability to go through a 4-year program is now on average in this country 6 years. And to get a 2-year degree, on average, I think it's 3 to 4 years. So the typical perfect, I'm going to go to college in 4 years and obtain a degree, and I'm going to be completely ready for this experience, is not unheard of. Certainly we all know a couple people whose children or cousin or niece or nephew have had that perfect college experience. But it is not the norm, and I think we need to deconstruct what college is and can be before we can determine what college can and should be for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So let's explore the real college student a little more. What we've found in research is these students are not well-versed in their self-advocacy skills. They are not comfortable telling people about their disability. They may not have come to terms with what their disability is. They probably have very little understanding of the types of accommodations they've received in high school or the modifications they've received. They often know very little about how to access and receive supports in college. And for the most part, they're just sick of having a big old label stamped on their forehead. They see college as a chance to shrug off that mantle of disability that they've been toting around with their IEP through high school. And unfortunately, because too often we make disability a negative, an area of vulnerability with young people with disabilities, and we don't give them too many opportunities to demonstrate their strengths related to their knowledge about themselves and their ability to self-advocate. Too often, the result is students with disabilities don't want to be known as having a disability. So this little chart that I'm showing here shows you, these are all students who have disabilities. Let me just start there. These are all students who were followed by the National Longitudinal Transition Study who had been identified as having a disability in high school. When they left, if you look at the very first bar, over 50% of them did not consider themselves to have a disability. So just the mere act of leaving high school eliminated their disability in their minds. It was gone. Though the number of who had a disability, who considered themselves to have a disability but did not inform their college is low. And the informed the school about 30% before enrollment. 30% of students who had a disability considered themselves to have a disability and informed the school. So what this means is we're setting students up to go into college and feel as if they don't want to acknowledge they have a disability, which in turn robs them of the opportunity to receive any accommodations that could help them achieve their goals in college. So this is really problematic because there's a huge difference, and if you're familiar with the way college works and how it's different from special education. In special education, our goal is support, scaffold, and succeed. We help students succeed, get through the class, get their diploma if they can, help them achieve their IEP goals however possible. But once they go into college, there are no modifications. There is no scaffolding. The student, if they want supports, needs to go to the Disability Services Office, self-identify, demonstrate what types of accommodations they require based on their disability. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And the parent, while in the background can provide a supporting role to the student, in the K-12 system, the parent is front and center. The parent's helping make decisions. The parent's guiding the process. In college, professors, disability services providers, any college faculty or staff is going to be dealing with the student and the student only as the primary decision maker. And this is a huge transition. And I have to say, many students, if not most students, are highly unprepared for this experience. And I'm not surprised by this. And I think sometimes, especially in the area of transition, we are so focused on what do you want to be, what are you going to do you like this job, do you like this job, what kind of working environment do you like the best, what are you struggling with in learning? We bombard students with all these questions and somehow think that at the ripe old age of 16 or 17 or even 19, they're going to have the self-knowledge to guide things in the perfect direction. When in fact, very few of us at age 17, 18, or 19 were necessarily the best decision maker when it came to our own future. Certainly, we tried. So I'm putting this question up on the screen because I think sometimes transition in theory and transition in reality are very different. And I just want you to take a moment and think about what you struggled most with in college. If you feel like sharing or are comfortable sharing, you can type it in the chat box. I will type mine. Hold on, I'm holding my phone so y'all can hear me. So what I struggled most with in college was time management and loneliness. Oh, I can't spell lone. Can't do two things at once. And apparently, multitasking is this challenge I still face. So if you don't have to type, I was just seeing if any brave individuals wanted to share it. But if you think about what you struggled most with in college, whether it was your grades, whether it was a personal situation, whether it was finances, whether it was your health, everybody has struggles when they get into college. But people with disabilities, because of the way our systems are created, have to take what they struggle with the most, their greatest area of vulnerability, and obviously the area that most of them wish they could leave back in high school, and they have to serve it up on a platter to a whole new set of professionals who don't know them from Adam and ask for help. And I just want you to think about how you would feel as a new, maybe vulnerable young person with not a lot of experience or confidence going into this new educational setting and telling a complete stranger, oh, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for sharing. Michelle said developing effective study habits. I think that was really hard for a lot of us. So what we ask students to do when we say they have to self-identify, it's very easy to stick a bullet on a PowerPoint slide and say, well, students with disabilities must self-identify at the Disability Services Office in order to gain access to their accommodations. But this is massive, and the amount of courage and planning and practice it takes for a young person to do this and feel confident and comfortable and effective in that role is something that I think we disregard a little bit in transition planning, and all of the skills that can lead up to that interaction. It could take years, but I know when I had troubles in college, I didn't have to tell everybody about it, and I didn't have to acknowledge that I felt vulnerable, or that I felt like I was dependent on somebody else for help, and that's very, very hard to do. So the other thing that I think sometimes when we're helping students talk about and think about and plan for their disability is the words we say, and the words we say in IEPs and a student's current educational performance, or the language we would use to describe an accommodation, is very different than the language students would use. And even their use of their disability label, whether they say I have autism, I have an intellectual disability, I have a learning disability, I use a wheelchair, I have visual impairment, the label may or may not mean something to them or have power or imbue content or knowledge to the person they're saying that to. But for the most part, labels don't tell you much about what people need. So with students with disabilities, I think the more often we can provide them with opportunities to not only think about and know who they are as learners and what they need to succeed and achieve their learning goals, but the opportunity to practice saying it, and saying it to people who they may not know very well. So saying it to your mom is one thing, saying it to your teacher is another level. Saying it to somebody you've never met before is even more nerve-wracking. But I think we need to plan for those. We know that's the reality. It's not like, oh, well, he may or may not ever have to do that. If he's going to college, he will have to do that. So knowing that, giving students the opportunity to seek supports and ask for help that is very specific throughout their time, both through middle and high school, I think is really important. Now what I've put up on the screen here, it says choosing your words. I have a hard time remembering steps when told verbally. I have a language disability and trouble finding the right words. I don't want everybody to know that I had a disability. These are students' actual words. These are quotes from students about how hard it is sometimes to share what they see as their weaknesses and the language they feel comfortable using. I think that's another important thing, honoring students' language and helping them know the words that will feel right coming out of their mouth when they're telling somebody what they need. And I think that's a better way of framing it. What do you need to succeed? Because self-advocacy sometimes I think is set up to feel as if I have to fight for something, whereas I view self-advocacy as true leadership skills. I think if you come into a situation, you assess the environment, and then you come over to me and you tell me what you need to help you succeed and attain your goals, that's leadership. I see leaders do that in the business world. I see leaders do that in the nonprofit world. They come into a situation, they assess it, they tell people what they need to do, and then they achieve a goal. And that is true leadership. So I think we need to reframe things a little bit to help youth with disabilities understand that when they are advocating for their needs, that is leadership. All right, so this is a video of a young woman. I was hoping it would work. I didn't know if it would, and it doesn't look like it's going to let me play it. So what I will do before the end of this call is type in the URL. It's a YouTube video, but this is a young woman who has a disability who did a blog about how important it was for her to get up the courage when she went to college to go into the Disability Services Office and ask for help. And she describes her feelings about it. And I shared it with a group of professionals and parents about 2 weeks ago, and every single one of them wrote it down because they wanted to take it home and show it to their students or to their classroom or to their child. So I will share the link with you all, and hopefully you will find it as wonderful as I did, because I thought this young girl was brave and amazing and very, very funny. Okay, so I'm going to move us forward. Well, we talked about this a little bit. I think the other thing that students don't frequently get in high school or even in middle school is they may receive a large array of supports without even knowing it. We modify the curriculum, we modify an assignment, we provide some scaffolding on tests, we do some highlighting, some underlining, we remove some questions. All of these things happen near students, but the student had no skin in the game. They weren't expected to ask for it. They get it whether they want it or not. And most often they're not even aware it's happening. And I think one of the things we can start to do is put in an IEP and a transition goal. Student will be aware of accommodations received in whatever class. Student will discuss with the teacher how the accommodation worked or didn't work. As students begin to get closer to the age where they're going to be leaving the high school environment, looking at the types of accommodations that are available in college if they're looking to go to college, and trying to understand how what they get in high school will change in college and how it will change. That's a huge leap for young people, and I think we need to talk about that leap and prepare them for it. Often transition professionals aren't really aware of how things change in college. There's a great divide between how K-12 and transition people think we prepare students for college and how well college professionals think students are prepared for college. So I think we need to work toward filling the gap in between those perspectives. So we've talked a little bit about the fallacy of the perfect ideal college student, and now I'm going to talk a little bit more about that real college student who I think is probably going to be more like many of the students we work with and many of the young people we know. Often real college students have financial need. It's a very hard thing to afford college these days. Getting student loans, repaying student loans, the amount college tuition just keeps going up and up and up. And often students go into college still really not having a good idea. I think it's a very strange breed of student at 18 to go into college and saying, I am absolutely going to become this. And 4 or 6 years later, they become this. Which is, I think, is okay. I think that growth, that maturing, that evolving, trying on a few different personas, a few different futures is one of the beautiful things about college that allows students to take off maybe some of the blinders of who they thought they could be in high school and try on new profiles. But the real college student is probably pretty broke and isn't really sure what they're going to do. So I think the things we can do as transition professionals and as parents is to become familiar with ways both to help students understand and families understand how to pay for college and to have a better understanding about the employment trajectory. So when it comes to the payment, especially for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, the options for funding are starting to change. Because of some provisions that were in the 2008 Higher Education Opportunities Act, students with intellectual disabilities who apply to a certain kind of program known as a comprehensive transition program are now able to access financial aid. So that means students without a high school diploma who are attending a CTP or a comprehensive transition program could access 3 non-loan-based kinds of aid, which would be Pell Grants, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grants, and work-study funds. And this would all culminate for a student who's not matriculating. These students don't have to be in a degree-granting program. CTPs do not have to culminate in degree attainment. So this has opened up a new category of program for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But for all other students, certainly knowing if a youth who's transitioning is going to go to college, you should be aware of not only the financial aid options through Title IV programs, but also are there waivers in your state. Sometimes SSDI will provide a waiver for certain community colleges, will waive tuition for students who are receiving supplemental security income. Sometimes VR will provide stipends towards post-secondary education. Some state vocational, I'm sorry if you don't know what VR, I shouldn't have put that as an acronym. Vocational rehabilitation at the state level will, if the post-secondary education is leading to directly to employment, will provide support. Now with VR funds, it can't be a sole source. You have to have tapped out every other option you have financially before VR will put money in the game. But I think the ideal college student either has lots of means or qualifies for a full ride on a scholarship, but the rest of our non-ideal college students probably have to put their pieces, their financial pieces together like a puzzle, and there might be a little bit of a scholarship here or a little bit of work study here. You might be able to get a small loan. You might be able to have certain fees waived. But the financial puzzle is complex, and I think as transition professionals or families, we definitely need to know what the options are within our state. Now, if you're going to go out of state, that complicates things. But knowing what funding mechanisms are in place. Currently, right now, for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, the primary funding source for over 50% of students who are going to programs is their family. Right now, that is still the primary source. I just got an update on the number of CTPs that are approved in the country from federal student aid this morning, and they are now up to 20 programs, which is, to me it seems great because 3 years ago there weren't any programs, but 20, when you look at the big picture of college opportunities for other youth, it's still very small. So I know it's growing, but it's not growing fast enough. All right, so I'm going to keep moving. The other thing we talked about, the real college student, is the lack of a concrete career goal. And one of the things I think it's important for us to remember with transitioning youth with disabilities is to compare them to students without disabilities who also don't necessarily have concrete career goals. The bullets on this slide just reflect the typical 18 to 26 experience of a young employed or variably employed youth. So they have entry-level jobs, they might have multiple jobs, they might experience periods of unemployment or job turnover. Really knowing the job search skills and business networks is so important. I think with transitioning youth with disabilities and people with developmental and intellectual disabilities in particular, too often we rely so much on the vocational rehabilitation professionals as our only employment network, whereas for ourselves, if we were looking for a new job or in between jobs or trying to expand our business network, we would be talking to our friends, our cousins, our aunts, our uncles, our parents. We'd be on LinkedIn. All of these resources, I think, go untapped and undertapped for youth with disabilities. And when I've talked to a number of families who have accessed their personal business network, often it'll lead to unexpected opportunities for employment. But I just want us to remember this ideal college student who has all of their stuff together isn't necessarily who we're going to see. And most people change jobs a lot. Young people change jobs even more. On this slide I have bullets that say baby boomers who were born between 1957 and 1964 held an average of 11 jobs between the ages of 18 and 44. and 25% held 15 jobs or more. Now, I don't know how many jobs you all have held in your lifetime. I should probably take a moment and count mine, but if I think about even the jobs I had between the ages of 16 and 21, I'm sure I am over 12 jobs. And they weren't all glamorous. I, too, sported the proud brown polyester of a McDonald's worker. I think we've all had our share of jobs that were just to make some money. You know, get something on your resume and get some money in your bank account. And I think we need to recognize that for youth with disabilities, even though the job search process may be more difficult, sometimes the job match process can be more complex and may require a little more sophisticated knowledge. The expectation that a young person with a disability is going to get a job when they leave high school, or even better, get a job when they leave college, and keep that job forever is completely unrealistic. And I don't think we should set parents or students up with the expectation that they should stay in the same job for longer than they want to. So what I'm suggesting is because working and going to college are sometimes a dance when you don't have to pick one or the other. Sometimes during parts of your life, college may be in the lead, and in other parts of your life, work may be in the lead. And as far as I can see, I think it's an iterative process. I know from my perspective, getting out of college and working and not liking the job I had led me to want more education, and more education led me to want a different job. And I think the ebb and flow of the employment versus learning cycle is one that we don't necessarily tell parents and students to expect. And I think we should help them understand that job change is normal and should be expected, and helping students transition between jobs, whether they're in college or not, is a really, really important transition skill. Okay, so I'm going to take us a little further away from employment and that ideal college student. I'm going to talk a little more about the things that help students get on a path to college. And as you can see, I've listed a couple things. There are many, many more I'm sure we could add here. If we were in a group together, I would probably be asking you to give me some ideas. Expectations, finances, disability, and student motivation. Of these, I not only believe, I really think I know that the thing that impacts the path to college more than anything else is expectations. It is far and above the most powerful force determining whether or not a student will or will not go to college. Recently, there was a study put out in 2012 that looked at how parent expectations about graduating and getting a job or attending college was associated with those outcomes, and there was a direct link. Parents who thought that their child would graduate with a diploma, their child would get a job, or their child would attend college, was associated with those outcomes. We've seen this over and over and over again. Unfortunately, thus far, the expectations that we as a field, both in the field of special education and transition, but in the field of education in general, we don't set college for youth with intellectual disabilities. I think there's been a huge increase in the amount and the frequency of college attendance by youth with disabilities as a whole. We have seen an uptick in the number of options and thus the number of students with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are going to college. But as a whole, it's still pretty low. And I think if we went to any of your schools right now and looked at students' IEPs, too often on students who had a label of intellectual developmental disability, the post-secondary field would be either not filled out or ruled not appropriate or not applicable. We did a study on this a few years ago, and we reviewed the goals of transitioning youth with various disabilities and compared them with students with intellectual disabilities, and we looked at their goals related to post-secondary education and employment. 33% of students with intellectual disability had the goal of sheltered employment. So from the get-go, the best they were ever going to do is go to a sheltered workshop. Only 8% of students with other disabilities had that goal. Well, when we looked at what were the predictors between the goals and the outcomes, the only transition goal that was a predictor of employment for youth with intellectual disability was having the goal of attending a 2- or 4-year college. 58% of students with other disabilities had the goal of attending a 2- or 4-year college, but only 11% of students with intellectual disabilities had this goal. So again, goals and expectations are inextricably linked, and if from the beginning you tell a student and their family that the goal of going to college is unrealistic or not possible, or the more we embed that vision of impossibility, the more it then becomes reflected in an objective way on the goals in their transition plan. And just like those 30% of students who had the goal of sheltered workshop on their transition plan, I could probably bet that there's a significant portion of them that had they been told that they could get a job and or go to college or both from the moment they started in kindergarten until the moment they left, that a high percentage of them would have had different outcomes. As Barb mentioned during the introduction, I work with the transition programs for students with intellectual disabilities that were newly funded under the 2008 Higher Education Opportunities Act. And these transition programs are partnerships in many ways between local school systems and higher education institutions. And I've heard story after story of these young people who are now in college, taking college classes, and working in paid jobs. But if the TIPSID had not been funded and the program had not been developed, that those students would have been in a sheltered workshop because that was the only available option in their community. So when it comes to the myth that college isn't for kids with intellectual or developmental disabilities, I think it is much less based on their abilities as it is based on current opportunities and current knowledge about opportunities. So here's one of my myths. College sounds great, but you're not talking about my kids. My kids are. And I don't know, if you've been around for a long time, you've heard a variety of labels that have been used through our various professions. And I still hear them, unfortunately, but sadly, hopefully they will be soon weeded out of our vocabulary when it comes to young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So that's the myth, but I think it is a myth, because I think in reality students get to go to college based on their family's expectations, and I think their family's expectations are influenced by strongly, not solely, because I know a lot of people who've been told that it's impossible, it's impossible, it's impossible, and yet they buck the system and they have made it happen. But very often, parents will hear that professionals say, no, that's not possible, and the professionals give them their best guidance and their best knowledge and their best expectations based on what they know, based on what's in their community, based on what they've been told by their administration, based on what they've seen previous graduates do. But most of the time, those past experiences have not included college. So what they offer and tell parents is possible for their students is that they end up in a sheltered workshop based on their best knowledge available to those professionals at the time in that community. So is it really because the student isn't capable? Is it really because there isn't there aren't other options for that young person, either in employment or in post-secondary education. Perhaps sometimes, but I don't think we've actually provided consistent, strategic, best practice toward the eventual outcome of paid integrated employment and or post-secondary education for people with disabilities on a broad scale. So I think too often our message is to parents that it's just not possible. This slide has a few words missing, and I'm sorry, I think because it got switched around. Parents' hopes vanish when confronted with insufficient information and seemingly impassable barriers for their child's matriculation into college. This study was done by some colleagues recently and was published in the Journal of Policy and Practice for People with Intellectual Disabilities, and they surveyed parents about their hopes and dreams for students for college. One of the barriers that Think College is trying to address is the lack of information and an understanding about post-secondary education options for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Another recent study by Megan Griffin and some of her colleagues found that 73% of parents reported a lack of general information or guidance on post-secondary options for their students with intellectual disabilities. So there's a lack of information on the part of transition professionals. There's thus a subsequent lack of information on the part of parents. And there's a huge lack of information for students about knowing what's available in college, knowing how to access it, and knowing how to use that information to help them achieve their learning goals in college. So the upside of this is that information is available, and we can get the word out, and through wonderful experiences like MCIE doing this transition series and many other wonderful partners we have around the country really trying to spread the word about college options and opportunities and the skills you need to succeed in them and access them and create them, things are really starting to move in that direction. The other thing that impacts expectations are the academics, that people look at students who have lower reading levels, and because they have lower reading levels or lower levels of academic, they're told they're not college eligible, that they shouldn't be looking toward post-secondary education for their child, which I don't think is where we have done enough to provide students with the access to the technology they need, access to accommodations, and I think, again, we're going back to that ideal college definition of college is just reading books and learning in one manner. And the more we can embed universal design for learning, the more we can use technology to assist students who are non-readers, and this is happening all over the country right now. I think if we can use the things in elementary, middle, high school, then that knowledge of how to not necessarily circumvent, but address a learning need in an atypical manner will be our go-to. So here are some quotes from some parents. It would be great if the school system had the information to give parents on the options for these children, or the school system drops the ball with these children. And I don't want you to think that I'm throwing transition professionals under a bus here, because first of all, I think of myself as a transition professional. I love the field of transition, and I love transition specialists. I think they are dynamic and engaged and usually extremely devoted to helping the youth that they work with have the best outcomes they can achieve. But not all of them have received the best instruction or background to do their job. Not all of them are given the support they need or the administrative backup they need to think creatively and to explore innovative options. So I think that's one of the takeaways here is, you know, to be brave, to bring in your administration, to really look at what are all the options that are currently existing, and if there are not any in our community, if there's not any in our school system, in our region, in our state, to cultivate some people to look at that issue. And we've done that with Think College all across the country. We've worked with, I think, 19 different states to do statewide strategic planning to begin better partnerships to create opportunities for post-secondary education access. So it looks like we're moving towards 4:45, so I'm going to move along. As you can tell, I could just talk to you about this all day, and I hope by now you've at least purchased a plane ticket somewhere, or it looks like now there's a car advertisement. I'm wondering if that's keeping you looking at the screen. It's such a strange format. So our pathways to college. Okay, so the perfect ideal college student typically would take the traditional matriculated pathway where they'd take a placement test, they'd pursue a degree, and they might seek reasonable accommodations. They'd be going to college through the front door. The alternate or non-matriculated path is really based more around person-centered planning. You create an individual support plan for a student. It may be focused on employment goals. It may be focused on personal development goals, and they may or may not pursue a degree. So these two paths are becoming clearer and clearer, and while the traditional path is the one that I think gets the most play on the airways, the non-traditional path is becoming more and more recognized as a useful and legitimate pathway, not just for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, but for people with a wide range of profiles. I'm sharing with you here a picture of a friend of ours at Think College, Claire Bible, who had a non-traditional path. Claire went to a specialized program in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Threshold, which is at Lesley College. It was at the time one of the few programs that would accept her. Claire does have an intellectual disability. They offered clerical and child care programs. And while Claire admits that she learned a great deal at that program, she really wanted to pursue her passion. She loves art and poetry and theater and drama. And when she left Threshold, she returned to her home in Wisconsin and found that not far from her, there was a new program being started called the Cutting Edge Program at Edgewood College. And it was an individualized program that allowed her to pursue a course of study that was really based on her person-centered plan and what she wanted to learn. And she took English classes and art classes, and she found it very, very rewarding. She also was able to co-teach a few classes. She's a striking individual, but what's most striking about her is her achievement of this alternate path to and through college and how it allowed her to achieve a different kind of goal than she would have achieved perhaps 10 or 15 years ago, where I can guarantee you she wouldn't have gone to either of these programs. She would have been in a sheltered workshop. So what are some of the things that we can do as students are transitioning into post-secondary education? Summer bridge programs are often available at local colleges. Many colleges have open enrollment. I often hear from parents who are seeking the perfect college placement for their child's very first college experience, and I caution against that and suggest that they consider supporting their child to take a single non-credit class at a local community college or through Park and Recs or through adult education, something that is fun and engaging, but is outside of the realm of their high school work, outside of the realm of their transition experience. So it allows students a chance to try on what it's like to learn as an adult in an adult learning environment with other adults who have similar interests. And you can learn a lot about who you are as a learner. How did it feel? Was it the right setting? Was it the right subject matter? Was it the right time of day? How hard was it to coordinate the supports? You'll gather so much knowledge and information, or what we call transition assessment data, just by allowing the student to engage in that experience. And I think the more you can do that, the better prepared you are to make realistic plans about what's coming next. Other post-secondary preparation experiences could be a dual enrollment program where the student is experiencing their final 2 to 3 years of transition education in a college-based setting. They may be taking courses, they may be working, they may be doing a combination of both, all while accessing the experiences and social opportunities in clubs and organizations on campus. There's probably about 25% of the programs that we're serving, that we're working with the TIPSIDs, are serving dually enrolled students. And of the 205 programs we have in the Think College Programs database, I think 78 of them are serving students who are dually enrolled. Also taking College 101 courses, Intro to College courses, anything to engage in some preparation. I think transition professionals sometimes work really well with these types of opportunities and engage with this information. Not everybody does. So I would suggest that if you look in your community and see what's available. So some of the things that we can help do to move the needle toward post-secondary education is help students and families and professionals change their expectations for youth with intellectual developmental disabilities and other disabilities. Certainly helping them focus on flexibility in the path a student takes and not thinking there's only one route toward a perfect college experience. Again, revisiting the idea that it can be iterative, that it can be done in small steps. Actually, I'm going to move us over this for 1 second. I will go back, I promise. But this is sort of where we are right now. When you are looking at creating a college option or college experience, there's a few questions you need to ask yourself. The first is knowing what's in your community. The second is knowing what's not available in your community. And then coming to terms with how far are you willing to go get what it is you desire. And that's a conversation that parents often have to have and think about and know that what they're willing to do and where they're willing to go when their students just leaving high school may very well look different than what they're willing to do and where they're willing to let their student go 3 or 4 years post-high school. And I think that's okay. There's no one right answer or one right path. So looking at the balance of what's out there and what you want for your child, and for transition professionals, helping parents think about what is it they want and then what's available in my community, and then what can we invest in this. And you have to approach the investment piece from a very non-judgmental place, because it could be that college is one tiny little part of their child's future right now, because right now that kid really needs to get a job, and that parent's putting 2 other kids through college and they're already working 3 jobs, and it can't be the end-all be-all goal in their life. Now, will that change in the future? It may or it may not. But what is reasonable in terms of what's out there, how much time you have to invest in this, and how much money you can put toward it, and just being honest about what's available and what level of priority college has for a family in the short term, knowing that it may take a few different types of college or a few different tries. Thinking back to Claire's experience, she went to one program out of state, cost a lot of money, but she wanted more learning, like many of us who have some learning and decide to transfer college or go on to a different kind of college. For people with disabilities, those options can and should also be on the table. So looking at your priorities, one of the things you should think about is how important are different aspects of the program? Is the social component the most important part? Is the academic access portion the most important part? Are certain kinds of supports the most important part? What is the must-have? Because there are no perfect options. I wish I could tell you every program is perfect. They all provide the perfect wraparound services, but they don't, and they're not out there. So really knowing what you're looking for, and also knowing that what you're looking for now may change in the future. The other thing to consider as you approach learning in college is that students' readiness for different kinds of learning change over time. So a first, second, or third college experience may really be at a introductory level to acclimate and be exposed to how do you navigate adult learning, what are the components. I have to sit in a classroom, there's a lot of people talking, or it's very quiet, or there's note-taking, or it's a 3-hour class, and good Lord, it's Wednesday night and I'm tired. So there's that kind of learning, and then the next level is be content or interest. If I really want to know about this, I want to learn more, I either have a personal interest or an employment interest, but you're engaged with the content at a slightly higher level. And then there's an applied content level where a student's taking a class because they want to achieve a certain outcome. And I think you want to consider which of these levels for each educational experience the student's going to come in at, so you can be realistic about what the expectations are, and you can share what your goals are with the people who are involved. So knowing what you're trying to achieve and communicating either with the professor or with an advisor or with a disability service provider or a peer mentor, knowing what a student's trying to achieve out of a class is an important component. And then helping students know what they're trying to achieve, that they can then use that knowledge to build what their next step will be. I think, to me, this is what deconstructed higher education can look like, because all learning goals are legitimate. If you know what you want to learn, you're motivated to do it, and you're trying to achieve a goal that leads you down a path, it's a legitimate learning goal. And to me, I think that's a very exciting part of this systems change effort. All right, Barb, I'm trying to remember how much more I have, because I know you probably wanted me to save time for questions, right?
Yes, but you have probably about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Okay. All right, then I will try and wrap it up.
And folks can type questions. Yeah, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box now while Meg's finishing up.
Okay. Thank you, Barb. So what can you do tomorrow? Well, know what's in your region, explore available options. We've tried to capture and reflect as many options as we know of in the Think College Programs database, which is searchable on thinkcollege.net. But I'm sure there are many options out there that we don't have, so please feel free to send them to us if you find some. And provide flexibility in your planning. Really look at what's going to work now, what's going to work a little later, and knowing that what I hear all the time from parents of kids who have gone to college against all odds, have succeeded, and then have gone way beyond their parents' wildest dreams, is the parents that I never thought he or she could do this. And that's really the takeaway for me when I hear those stories is, God, what if you really did think he or she could have achieved it? Where would they be? And they constantly amaze and surprise us with what they're capable of doing. So the more you can support these aspirations, the more you can share videos and stories. We just did a families webinar with 5 or 6 different parents of kids who have gone to and through college. Students all had intellectual disabilities or autism, and the families talked about their journeys and how powerful it was and how much things changed and what their struggles were. And those stories, learn from them and find out, what's the kernel that you can take away and take home with you and change what you do in your home or in your classroom. And then helping students understand how things change, getting them on campus, talking to them about what they think college is. I think the field of post-secondary education for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, to me, has huge implications, and the promise of it, I think, lies in these 3 bullets. It allows people with disabilities to become a consumer of their education instead of a passive recipient. They see learning as a positive impact in their life, and they view learning as a way to achieve their goals. Learning the desired knowledge they have and knowing that at any point in their life, whether they're 18, 25, 37, or 59, if they want to learn something, they know there are places in the community that they can go and access that learning and use it to change their lives in real and meaningful ways. So that's it. I know I skipped a few slides, Barb. I'm sorry, but I was trying to keep us within the time. Here's thinkcollege.net, our website, and here's my email. I'm happy to hear from you now and answer questions, or if you have questions in the future, go ahead and send me an email.
Okay, thanks, Meg. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but while people are thinking about that, I just wanted to thank you again, Meg. It's been a great series, and it was nice to have you finish it up. I'll be following up with everybody, so if you want to send me the video link, I can send that in an email, and I'll also send out the PowerPoint and the recording of this session within the next couple of days. And if anybody has
Barb,
any...
You're going to send out the handouts I sent you as well?
Yes, I will. I have 3 handouts that Meg sent, so that'll be coming. Look for an email with all of this information in the next couple of days. Okay, if there aren't any questions at this point, I'm just going to thank Meg again and tell you all to enjoy your evening. Thanks again.
Thanks, Barb.
Thank you,
Meg.
Meg.
Everybody.